Patanjali is a proper Indian name. Several important Sanskrit works are ascribed to one or more authors of this name, and a great deal of scholarship has been devoted over the last century or so to the issue of disambiguation. Amongst the more important authors called Patanjali are the author of the Mahabhasya, an advanced treatise on Sanskrit grammar and linguistics framed as a commentary on Katyayana's Vartikas on Panini's Astadhyayi. This Patanjali's life is the only one which can be securely dated. The compiler of the Yoga Sutras, an important collection of aphorisms on yoga practice, who according to some historians was a notable person of Samkhya, contemporaneous with Ishvara Krishna's Samkhyakarika around AD 400. He was native to Kashmir. Patanjali is one of the 18 Siddhas in the Tamil Siddha tradition, the author of an unspecified work of medicine. In some Sanskrit grammatical works, Patanjali is called the man from Gonada. Gonada is the ancient name of Gonda, a district of Uttar Pradesh, about 50 kilometers north of Ayodhya. Greek chronicles mention about Patanjali, when they laid their siege on Saket, i.e., Ayodhya in 2nd century BC. This implies that Patanjali most probably was from Gonda, a district of immense importance where Buddha and Mahavira resided. In fact, Shravasta, just off Gonda, further to north, was a center of power during that millennium and was the capital of the said Janapad. Beside, this was an area of traditional Sanskrit learning. Some hold the view that he was born at the Gonada, situated at Tirukonamalai, Sri Lanka. This tradition is corroborated in Tirumala's 7th century Tamil Tirumandaram, which describes him as hailing from then Kailasam, and tradition has him visiting the Thalai Nataraja temple, Chidambaram, where he wrote the Sharana Shrungarayita Stotram on Nataraja. Name. The compound name Patanjali has been explained by Sanskrit commentators in two ways. The first explanation of the word is Anjalau Pataniti Patanjali, which is a Myravyam Sarkadi compound with Sakundvadi Sandhi. The name comes from a legend about his birth which says that Esa, the divine serpent king, incarnated as a snakelet and fell into the folded hands of a Brahmin. The second explanation parses the word as a Bahuvrihi compound Patanta Namaskayat Vinajanana Manjalayo Yasmin Visaisar. The compound name Patanjali, Patan is bank, and Jal is water, in the Sindhi language of the Indus Valley civilization. Life. That the Patanjalis who wrote on yoga and on grammar were two different scholars was compellingly argued by the great scholar of Sanskrit literature, Louis Renu. Many outstanding scholars since then have re-examined the question and come to the same conclusion. The tradition that one Patanjali wrote treatises on grammar, medicine and yoga is memorialized in a verse by Bhoja at the start of his commentary on the Yoga Sutras. This tradition is discussed by Moilenbeld, who traces this, a relatively late, idea back to Bhoja, who was perhaps influenced by a verse by Bhartrhari that speaks of an expert in yoga, medicine and grammar who, however, is not named. Grammar tradition. In the grammatical tradition, Patanjali is believed, for the reason given above, to have lived in the 2nd century BCE. Some say that he lectured on Paninian grammar at her place, called Nagarkupa, which is identified with modern-day Nagarkuan. He lectured for 85 days, which resulted in the 85 Arnikas or daily lessons of the Mahabhasya. Many writers in the grammar tradition, including Bhattoji Dikshita, Hari Dikshita, Nageshwar Bhatta, and Kaunda Bhatta, held Patanjali to be an incarnation of the mythical serpent Esa. Yoga tradition. In the yoga tradition, Patanjali is a revered name and has been deified by many groups, especially in the Shaivite Bhakti tradition. It is claimed by some that Patanjali is an incarnation of the mythical serpent Ananta. This Patanjali's oeuvre comprises the sutras about yoga and the commentary integral to the sutras, called the Bhashya. In the past, the sutras and the bhashya have been considered by some to have had different authors, the commentary being ascribed to an editor. However, a recent comprehensive re-examination of all the evidence has confirmed the view of many older Sanskrit authors in the period before 1000 that one and the same person composed the sutras and the bhashya commentary. The same study also confirms the date of composition of this work as falling in approximately 400 BC. Tamil Shaivite legend regarding his early years. A Tamil Shaiva Siddhanta tradition from around 10th century AD holds that Patanjali learned yoga along with 7 other disciples from the great yogic guru Nandi Deva, as stated in Tirumala's Tirumandiram. Nandi Arulpatre Nadarai Nadinom Nundagal Nalvashiva Yoga Muni Mandruthors Huda Patanjali Vyakramar Nodu En Marama Aim. Translation: We sought the feet of the Lord who graced Nandix Vera, the 4 Nandas, Savayoga Muni, Patanjali, Vyagrapada and I. We were these 8. The ancient Kali Kautivam also describes how Patanjali and Vyagrapada gathered along with the gods in the linear Chidambaram to watch Shiva and Kali dance and perform the 108 mystic Haranas, which formed the foundation for the system of Natya Yoga. He has also written Sharana Shrungarayita Stotram on Nataraja. This Tamil tradition also gives his birthplace in South Kailash, Konaswaram Temple, Trincomalee. Some other traditions feel that his being born in Bharatavarsha, the part of the ancient world corresponding to South Asia, is beneath his godlike status, and that he must have been born in the Jambudvipa, the mythical center of the universe. Patanjali's Siddha is also mentioned by the goldsmith sage Bogar. It was why my grandfather who said, "Climb and see," but it was Kalanyanatha who gave me birth. Patanjali, via Jeremiah, and Savayogi Muni also rightly said, "Look, this is the path." Bogar 7000. This tradition also holds that Patanjali was a master of dance. Other legends. In one popular legend, Patanjali was born to Atri and his wife Anasuya. According to this tradition, Anasuya had to go through a stern test of her chastity when the Trimurti themselves came as bhikshaks and asked her for bhiksha. She passed their test by accepting them as her children and fed them. She got the boon where all the 3 Murtis will be born to them. They were Somaskandan or Patanjali, Dattatreya, and Durvasa. Samadhi. The Samadhi of Patanjali Maharishi is believed to be in Tirupati or Brahmapuraswara temple, where Lord Brahma installed 12 Shiva lingams and worshipped Lord Shiva to get back his tekas. Shankaracharya's guru had told Shankaracharya that Patanjali was reincarnated as Govinda Bhagavatpada and was meditating in a cave somewhere in the state of Samadhi. Ascribed works. Whether the 2 works, the Yoga Sutras and the Mahabhasya, are by the same author has been the subject of considerable debate. The authorship of the 2 is first attributed to the same person in Bojadiva's Rajamartanda, a relatively late commentary on the Yoga Sutras, as well as several subsequent texts. As for the texts themselves, the Yoga Sutra i.e. 44 cites a sutra as that from Patanjali by name, but this line itself is not from the Mahabhasya. This 10th century legend of single authorship is doubtful. The literary styles and contents of the Yoga Sutras and the Mahabhasya are entirely different, and the only work on medicine attributed to Patanjali is lost. Sources of doubt include the lack of cross-references between the texts, and no mutual awareness of each other, unlike other cases of multiple works by Sanskrit authors. Also, some elements in the Yoga Sutras may date from as late as the 4th century AD, but such changes may be due to divergent authorship, or due to later additions which are not atypical in the oral tradition. Most scholars refer to both works as by Patanjali, without meaning that they are by the same author. In addition to the Mahabhasya and Yoga Sutras, the 11th century commentary on Karika by the Bengali scholar Kakrapanadat Mahabharata, and the 16th century text Patanjalikarita ascribes to Patanjali a medical text called the Karakaprasha Samstar, which is apparently a revision of the medical treatise by Karaka. While there is a short treatise on yoga in the medical work called the Karaka Samhita, towards the end of the chapter called Sarirasthana, it is notable for not bearing much resemblance to the Yoga Sutras, and in fact presents a form of eightfold yoga that is completely different from that laid out by Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras and the commentary Yoga Sutra Bhāsya. The tradition that holds that all three works are by the same author is summed up in this verse from the beginning of Bhoja's Rajamartanda, commentary on the Yoga Sutras. Yogena Chittasya, Padina Vakam, Malam Sarirasya California Vijakarna Yopakarot Tampravaram Muninim Patanjalim Pranalia Anatosma. English translation. I bow with my hands together to the eminent sage Patanjali, who removed the impurities of the mind through yoga, of speech through grammar, and of the body through medicine. Yoga Sutra. The yoga tradition is much older. There are references in the Mahabharata, and the Gita identifies three kinds of yoga. The Yoga Sutras codifies the royal or best yoga practices, presenting these as an eight-limbed system. The philosophic tradition is related to the Sankhya school. The focus is on the mind. The second sutra defines yoga. It is the cessation of all mental fluctuations. All wandering thoughts cease and the mind is focused on a single thought. In contrast to the focus on the mind in the Yoga Sutras, later traditions of yoga such as the Hatha Yoga focus on more complex asana or body postures. Relevance of his contribution to yogic traditions. Patanjali defended in his yoga treatise several ideas that are not mainstream of either Sankhya or yoga. He, according to the Iyengar adept, biographer and scholar Kofi Bizia, acknowledges the ego not as a separate entity. The subtle body linga sarira he would not regard as permanent, and he would deny it a direct control over external matters. This is not in accord with classical Sankhya and yoga. Although much of the aphorisms in the Yoga Sutra possibly predates Patanjali, it is clear that much is original and it is more than a mere compilation. The clarity and unity he brought to divergent views prevalent till then has inspired a long line of teachers and practitioners up to the present day, in which BKS Iyengar is a known defender. With some translators he seems to be a dry and technical propounder of the philosophy, but with others he is an empathic and humorous witty friend and spiritual guide. Mahabharata. The Mahabharata of Patanjali on the Astadhyayi of Panini is a major early exposition on Panini, along with the somewhat earlier Vartika by Katyayana. Here he raises the issue of whether meaning ascribes to a specific instance or to a category. Kim Punarakriti Padartha, Ahosvad Dravyam. Now what is meaning of a word? Is it a particular instance or a general shape? This discussion arises in Patanjali in connection with a sutra that states that a plural form may be used in the sense of the singular when designating a species. Another aspect dealt with by Patanjali relates to how words and meanings are associated. Patanjali claims Shadda Pramana, that the evidentiary value of words is inherent in them, and not derived externally. The word-meaning association is natural. The argument he gives is that people do not make an effort to manufacture words. When we need a pot, we ask the potter to make a pot for us. The same is not true of words. We do not usually approach grammarians and ask them to manufacture words for our use. 27. This is similar to the argument in the early part of Plato's Cratylus, where morphemes are described as natural, e.g., the sound L is associated with softness. These issues in the word-meaning relation would elaborated in the Sanskrit linguistic tradition, in debates between the Mimamsa, Nyaya and Buddhist schools over the next 15 centuries. Sphota. Patanjali also defines an early notion of sphota, which would be elaborated considerably by later Sanskrit linguists like Bhartrihari. In Patanjali, a sphota is the invariant quality of speech. The noisy element can be long or short, but the sphota remains unaffected by individual speaker differences. Thus, a single letter or sound, such as K, P or A, is an abstraction, distinct from variants produced in actual enunciation. This concept has been linked to the modern notion of phoneme, the minimum distinction that defines semantically distinct sounds. Thus, a phoneme is an abstraction for a range of sounds. However, in later writings, especially in Bhartrihari, the notion of sphota changes to become more of a mental state, preceding the actual utterance, akin to the lemma. Patanjali's writings alpha epsilon O elaborate some principles of morphology. In the context of elaborating on Panini's aphorisms, he also discusses Katyayana's commentary, which are also aphoristic and sutra-like. In the later tradition, these were transmitted as embedded in Patanjali's discussion. In general, he defends many positions of Panini which were interpreted somewhat differently in Katyayana metaphysics. His grammatical motivation, unlike Panini's objectives in the Ashtadhyayi, which is to distinguish correct forms and meanings from incorrect ones, Patanjali's objectives are more metaphysical. These include the correct recitations of the scriptures, maintaining the purity of texts, clarifying ambiguity, and also the pedagogic goal of providing an easier learning mechanism. This stronger metaphysical bent has also been indicated by some as one of the unifying themes between the Yoga Sutras and the Mahabharata. Although a close examination of actual Sanskrit usage by Woods showed no similarities in language or terminology, the text of the Mahabharata was first critically edited by the 19th-century Orientalist Franz Kailaun, who also developed philological criteria for distinguishing Katyayana's voice from Patanjali's. Subsequently, a number of other editions have come out. The 1968 text and translation by S.D. Joshi and J.H.F. Rudbergen often being considered definitive. Regrettably, the latter work is incomplete. Patanjali also writes with a light touch. For example, his comment on the conflicts between the orthodox Brahmanic groups versus the heterodox Nastika groups seems relevant for religious conflict even today. The hostility between these groups was like that between a mongoose and a snake. He also sheds light on contemporary events, commenting on the recent Greek incursion, and also on several tribes that lived in the northwest regions of the subcontinent.